So you've plugged in a scanner, and it spits out a P0506 code. You know that little pit in your stomach? But hey, don't sweat it. Today, we're going to break down exactly what that code means and walk you through the most common fixes, step by step. It always starts like this, right? That little check engine light is just glowing on your dash, staring at you. So you grab your code reader and bam, P0506. Maybe your engine feels a little shaky at a stoplight, kind of rough, or maybe it's even stalled on you. So what is your car trying to tell you? Let's put this in simple terms. Your car's computer, its brain, has noticed that the engine's idle speed is dropping below where it's supposed to be. It's basically running just a little too slow when you're not on the gas, and that's what's causing that rough, shaky feeling. Now, to get this fixed, we've got to understand a pretty cool concept first, how your engine actually breathes when it's just sitting there waiting for the light to turn green. It's a really clever system. Okay, let's get into it. Imagine the throttle body is your engine's mouth. Inside that mouth, there's a little flap called the throttle plate. When you step on the gas, that flap swings open and lets air rush in. But when you take your foot off the gas to idle, that flap closes almost completely shut. Right, so you're probably thinking, if the main air supply is cut off, how in the world does the engine not just instantly stall out? Well, this is where a tiny but super important little bypass system comes into the picture. And that brings us to this little hero, the idle air control valve, or IAC valve for short. The best way to think of it is like a little breathing straw for your engine. It's controlled by the computer, and it opens just enough to let a tiny, precise amount of air sneak around that closed throttle plate, giving the engine just enough oxygen to keep humming along nice and smooth. And boom, that right there is the heart of our problem. When you see a P0506 code, it's telling you that this little breathing straw system isn't working right. It's either clogged up or it's malfunctioning, and it's not letting enough air sneak by. The engine is literally being starved of air, and that's what causes the idle to drop too low. Okay, so we know how it's supposed to work. Now we can play detective and figure out why it's failing. What are the usual suspects behind this low idle problem? You know, what's really telling here is how lopsided this is. By far, and I mean by far, the number one culprit is just plain old carbon buildup. It's this grimy gunk that builds up over thousands of miles, slowly choking out those tiny air passages. A faulty IAC valve itself is a distant second, and a vacuum leak is even less likely. Now, are there other possibilities? For sure. You could have a really clogged up air filter, a bad sensor that's feeding the computer bad info, or even a wiring problem. In some rare cases, it could point to a bigger engine issue, but you always check the simple stuff first. All right, this is the most important part. We don't just start guessing and throwing expensive parts of the problem. We're going to attack this logically, starting with the easiest, the cheapest, and the most probable fix. So, step one, and honestly, this is probably going to be your fix right here. Get yourself a can of throttle body cleaner and a rag or a soft brush. Your goal is to get in there and meticulously clean out all that black, crusty carbon from around the throttle plate. And this is key. Inside those little bypass passages the IAC valve uses, a lot of the time that's all it takes. But what if you do all that cleaning, you get it sparkling clean, and the idle is still rough? Well, that's when we start to get suspicious of the IAC valve itself. The little motor inside might be stuck, or it could have failed electronically. At that point, you'd need to test it and probably replace it. Okay, let's say you've cleaned the throttle body. Maybe you've even swapped in a new IAC valve, but that stubborn P0506 code pops right back up. What now? The next stop on our diagnostic train is hunting for a vacuum leak. That just means air is getting into the engine from somewhere it shouldn't be. So you've got a couple of ways to hunt these leaks down. The classic do-it-yourself method is to get the engine running and carefully spray some carb cleaner around the vacuum hoses and gaskets. If the engine idle suddenly changes, if it revs up or stumbles, you've found your leak. The pro method, which is way easier, uses a smoke machine to fill the whole system with smoke, and you just look for the little puff of smoke escaping. Okay, listen up, because this is super important. Once you've cleaned the parts or replaced something and you've solved the problem, you are not done yet. Please, don't just clear the code and call it a day, because you'll be skipping the most critical step of all. You have to perform what's called an idle learn procedure, and it makes perfect sense if you think about it. For months, maybe years, your car's computer has been fighting against that gunk, opening the ISC valve a little more to compensate. Now that everything is clean, its old settings are all wrong. This procedure basically wipes the slate clean and lets the computer learn the new correct idle position. All right, so let's boil this all down. P0506. That just means your idle is too low. The first thing you should always do is clean the throttle body. If that doesn't fix it, then you can investigate the IAC valve or hunt for vacuum leaks. And no matter what the fix ends up being, you absolutely must finish the job with an idle relearn. So you did it. You diagnosed the problem, you got your hands dirty, and now your car is humming along perfectly. That check engine light is gone. It really just leaves one question, doesn't it? You just conquered this, so what's next on your list?